You're listening to episode 35 of Liz's Healthy Table.
Looking for a healthy new way to feed your family without the hassle and hype? Welcome to Liz's Healthy Table, where your host, registered dietitian nutritionist Liz Weiss, serves up fresh and flavorful recipes with a tasty side of science, good nutrition, and fun. Are you and your family ready for some wholesome food that tastes great too? Don't change that dial. Your food adventure starts here.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Today's episode is all about tacos. I love tacos. Fish tacos are my favorite. Anything with like salmon, avocado, I love it. I love those crunchy corn tacos, the corn tortillas. I love soft corn tortillas. I love flour tortillas. And I love a variety of fillings, chicken, pork, beef, beans. I just had a blog post on scrambled egg tacos. And of course, you can't forget all those toppings. And my favorite would be avocados on top. Well, my guest today is a dietitian. She's also a chef. Her name is Sara Haas, like Haas Avocados, just a coincidence. And Sara is the author of the brand new book, Taco, 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 over 100 recipes for everybody. We are giving away a copy to one lucky U.S. winner. So head on over to the show notes from today's show on Liz's Healthy Table for a chance to enter to win. So Sara is this dietitian and a chef. So she's obviously a really great cook, and she's a cookbook author. She's a freelance writer, recipe developer, a media authority. She's a public speaker. She's a consultant. She's a mom. And if you actually listened to last week's show on Kids in the Kitchen, you can thank Sara for that show, because every August she organizes a bunch of food and nutrition bloggers from across the web to post their best Kids in the Kitchen tips and recipes. So if you kind of want to follow along, because we do it every August, just search for the hashtag Kids in the Kitchen on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Sara's website is sarahaasrdn.com. I'll give you a link to that in the show notes. You could also find her on Instagram at CookinRD, COOKIN, CookinRD. And there she posts recipes as well as nutrition tips and cooking tips. So on the show, we'll be talking tacos. We're going to walk you through a couple of recipes, including Sara's recipe for Mexican grilled corn tacos, which are perfect for summer. I actually made that recipe and I blogged about it. So lizshealthytable.com on the blog, you can get that recipe. Thank you, Sara. We're going to talk about a few other recipes from the book, and we're even going to dig into her dessert chapter. She has a recipe, get this, for s'mores tacos. S'mores are just, for me personally, this kind of childhood summer memory. And I have a thing for marshmallows. I actually like Rice Krispie treats too. So s'mores tacos, we're going to tell you about those. Liz's Healthy Table is brought to you by my friends at superhealthykids.com, your one-stop shop for recipes, meal plans, cooking videos, and tips for feeding kids of all ages. You can check them out at superhealthykids.com. The show's also brought to you by the Parents on Demand Network. It's an app filled with parenting podcasts, including shows like Preschool and Beyond. I have been a guest on that show. It's fantastic. They have different episodes, everything from how to feed kids a healthy diet, which is kind of why I was on the show, to raising kids, behavior issues, like you name it, you're going to find it on Preschool and Beyond. You can download the app Parents on Demand by visiting parentsondemand.com to learn all about it. If you have the app on your phone, you can access all of those parenting podcasts. So, creamy avocado sauce chicken tacos, apricot maple pork tenderloin tacos with pickled pineapple. If those recipes sound good to you, you are going to absolutely love today's show. Taco, taco, taco. Hey, Sara, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Liz.
So before we kind of dig into tacos, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I know you're a mom, you're a dietitian, you're also a chef, which is kind of a cool combination. So tell everybody about Sara.
Yes, well, it is a cool combination. I would happen to agree with you on that. But first and foremost, I define myself as, yes, a mom. I spend a lot of my time with my little sous chef, so shaping young minds. That's what I'm doing over here in Chicago. And I am also a dietitian. That was my first career path. And I love being a dietitian, but I also love food a whole lot. So that drove me to go to culinary school, and I got a degree in culinary arts. And then I just started doing stuff on my own and finally came about writing a couple books. And here I am today.
You have a daughter, right?
I do, yes.
How old is she?
She is 5.5, almost 6, but going on 13, I think.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, enjoy that ride. So you've got a great assistant. That's a fun age to really get kids into the kitchen. And we're going to talk a little bit later about kids in the kitchen, but really today's focus is tacos. I always love to know about sort of the life of a chef. Now, I went to cooking school as well. I went to the Cambridge School of Culinary Arts. And interestingly, I was pregnant with Simon, who's now 19. Could you imagine, like,
no,
being pregnant, having, I'm not going to say morning sickness, but you know when you're pregnant and like every smell really sets you off?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did that.
I don't either. There was one day when they were using the deep fat fryer, and I said, oh my gosh, I cannot be in the room right now. I got to get out of here. I can handle pastries, trust me, not the deep fat fryer.
That's too good.
Have you ever worked in a restaurant, Sara?
Oh, I've worked in lots of restaurants. When I was in high school, I got my first job at a candy store, which I loved. And then all through my teen years, I worked in restaurants, and it was a lot of fun, and you definitely see a lot of stuff for sure. Yeah.
What did you see? And then if you tell me what you saw, I'm going to give you my most disgusting story, because I was a waitress one summer, and you cannot even believe what I saw in that kitchen. But tell me your craziest story.
Well, I have one that when I was in college, I stayed one summer. Because ironically, when I was in college, I started off as an apparel merchandising major, and it wasn't until my sophomore year that I switched my major over to nutrition. So I stayed a summer so I could kind of catch up on everything. And I worked at a really nice restaurant on campus. And one of the days I worked in the kitchen, and so I was doing prep, and it was sort of late morning. And the sous chef came in, and he was already kind of a weird guy, I thought. But he came back to the restaurant, and he had biked into work, and it was a hot day because it was summer, and he took off his helmet, and then he stuck his entire head in the hand sink that's right inside the kitchen, which is pretty much a no-no. And then he just continued to like wash his entire head and face in the hand sink while we're all just sort of staring at him in wonder. Then he just got up and dried his hair off with, some random kitchen towel and went about his day. So
nice.
It was weird. Yeah.
I have to say, I got to beat you on that one. So I was working at a restaurant, no names to be mentioned, in Newport, Rhode Island. And I distinctively remember, now this is a long time ago. I remember we had like these bread baskets, and I can totally remember the head waitress. She'd probably been there like 40 years. I remember this cockroach.
Oh, stop.
Yes.
No.
Working its way into the bread basket, and she sort of shoos it out, and then out the bread goes. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
That's really foul.
And I apologize to all of our listeners for completely destroying their appetites today.
No,
Yeah.
You know what, Liz? That's why we don't. I mean, I love eating out, but I also don't, because we worked in restaurants, and I know.
I know. And I hope they've gotten better. And I think they have.
They have.
Yeah, restaurants, it's a whole different world.
It is.
Okay. Moving right along.
Moving on.
So I love tacos, and my husband, Tim, if people listen to this podcast, you would know from episode 1 that Tim is obsessed with fish tacos, and like every Sunday night, we have fish tacos. So kind of fish tacos are part of my world here. But if you could sort of define tacos, like how do you even define tacos? Because they seem to come in many different shapes and sizes.
Right? I agree. I think that it depends on who you ask. So probably a traditionalist would not have the same definition of a taco as I do. But I kind of feel like it's anything that you can put inside of a partially folded or wrapped up kind of shell. So, again, a vague definition, but if you look at my book, it sort of fits my theme because really I don't think of a taco as a tortilla necessarily or a taco shell. I do use that as a base in a lot of the recipes, but I really think that anything you can kind of fold up and put some stuff inside of it can become a taco.
Well, and we will get to your dessert tacos a little bit later in the show. And that's sort of, made with more like a pancake. So, but again, sit tight, everybody, because we're going to get to desserts in a bit. But let's start sort of at the bottom then. Like you've got corn tortillas, flour tortillas, you've got crunchy taco shells, which is kind of what we tend to do around my house. So do you have a preference, and kind of talk us through some of the bottom line basic of tacos, building a taco?
Right. So if I had to choose, I don't think I could. Here's the reason. I feel like it depends on what you're filling it with. So if you've got a bunch of ingredients that are really soft, let's say, fish tacos are great. Crunchy shell, I agree, because sometimes they can be a little soft. So having that little bit of crunch is really nice. Sometimes that can be overpowering for something that's already super flavorful though. So maybe you don't want the crunch, or maybe you already have crunch in the ingredients you're putting inside your taco. So I think it's really just a matter of preference, because I know some people don't care for the crunchy shells and some people don't care for the flour. Bottom line, I really like homemade tortillas the best. And it's even better if you can find, I know this is a question maybe for later, but if you can find a local place that makes tortillas. I live in Chicago, so we're really lucky to have a lot of people around here making tortillas, and they're really, really good. So if you can find someone making local tortillas, if you don't want to make them yourself, then that's kind of what I recommend, because they're so good.
I've kind of gotten into the soft corn tortillas lately, and I love that flavor. So that's kind of what I've been on, a little bit of a corn tortilla jag. But yeah, let's go right into Amber's question. Amber is a member of my podcast Posse, closed group on Facebook. Anyone can join. And she says that many store brands of tortillas, she says, have undesirable ingredients in them. So she wants to know if there are any brands that you recommend, or if you've got a homemade, say, whole wheat tortilla in the book. Like, can people make them themselves? Like, what kind of recipes do you have any in the book, or would you recommend if you want to do homemade, if you can't find like that good sort of local store-bought variety?
Right. I do have a couple of tortilla recipes. I do have a corn tortilla, and it's not a complete whole wheat tortilla recipe, but it's a mostly whole wheat tortilla. And I really like that recipe too, with a few tips. So the whole wheat tortilla recipe in the book is actually made with partially whole wheat flour and partially all-purpose flour. And that's for a reason, because I think Amber had expressed in hers that they can be a little tough, her whole wheat tortillas. Mm-hmm. And that's just the natural tendency of whole wheat flour if you don't add enough moisture. It's got to have enough liquid to absorb in there and make it soft. But if you use a little whole wheat flour to sort of balance the amount of moisture that tortilla is going to need, then you're going to end up with a softer product. So you can always try adding a little more whole wheat flour to this recipe if you want, but I found the half and half really works well. And then after you cook them, to wrap them up in I use a dish towel, like a really nice, not nice, I don't have anything really nice in my house, and a really thin tea towel. And that kind of keeps the moisture in there too while you're cooking the rest of them. And as far as buying something, if you don't have something local, I also recommend trying sprouted tortillas. You'll find those in the refrigerated section usually, but they have a really nice flavor, and they tend to have fewer ingredients, a lot of the less of the fillers and things. So you can always look for that there too.
Oh, like a sprouted grain tortilla.
Yes.
So the recipe that you have in your book, what are the ingredients? How do you make it?
Well, that one it's really simple. It's basically just whole wheat flour, all-purpose flour, a little bit of fat of your choice. I leave the fat up to you. So you could use olive oil, you could use coconut oil, you could use butter if you want, whatever, lard, whatever makes you happy. And then water and salt, and that's it. And then it's super simple. There's no leavening involved. All you have to do is mix all that stuff together. Then you let it rest a little bit. so that you're able to roll them out. And that's all you do. And then you just portion it out, roll it out into a little circle, and then you cook it on a really hot pan. I like to use my cast iron pan to do that because I feel like you get a really nice heat, consistent heat from that.
Okay. So kind of easy.
Super easy. I mean, it takes a little bit of time, but, do it on a Sunday when you have nothing else going on.
Yeah, I love it. So when I think about tacos, I did not eat them growing up because I grew up in the suburbs of New York. My mom, a home ec teacher, great cook, but we did sort of more traditional sort of American cuisine growing up. And certainly times have changed, which is great. But my intro to tacos would have been things like ground beef and that taco seasoning packet you see at the supermarket, and just very kind of basic. And certainly tacos have come a long way. And I've always had a beef, excuse the pun, with those the taco seasoning packets because they are so salty. Like, do you really need to go to the store and buy the taco kit full of salt, or is there a better way?
Oh, what's so funny is that I grew up the exact same way. The only taco I ever had growing up was a ground beef taco from the taco kit. And I thought it was amazing, which is kind of hilarious now. But if I want to make my own taco seasoning, I just make it myself. So my recommendation is that don't buy the overall kit, the thing that comes with the shells and all the sauces and all that stuff. Instead, you can look for the little packets of taco seasoning. A lot of them will not include sodium. Even some really good spice brands, like companies, I know they make taco seasoning as well. And a lot of those are sodium free too. And they'll just be a blend of spices. So my recommendation is to maybe start off that way if you're intimidated by making your own blend. Because then what you can do is if you buy the companies, they usually disclose all the spices on the container. So then when you're feeling more comfortable and you figure out what you like, you can start kind of experimenting with your own blends. Then you can start buying the chili powder, the cumin, the other things that you would use to make kind of the taco seasoning on your own. And then you can just make your own seasoning that way.
So if you made your own, what would you add to it?
Well, see, it depends. That's what's so great about it. I love heat. I'm a really big fan of spice. So I would probably buy a really hot chili powder. And like I said, I'm a big fan of cumin, so I would make sure there's cumin in there, a little bit of smoked paprika, probably some garlic powder, and what else would I? And a little bit of Mexican oregano, which is different, than the oregano, but it's so good.
That sounds really good. And I will say I'm a little bit wimpy when it comes to the heat and spices, but just it's kind of how I roll. So when you think about tacos, Sara, tell me about. This is our hard question. Tell me about your favorite recipe in taco, and just kind of talk us through it.
Right. So probably my favorite, that's so hard to choose. It's so funny because everybody wants me to pick a favorite. And after a while, I'm like, they're all my favorite. It's like choosing your favorite kid, I guess. But I would probably choose the brown sugar chili salmon tacos. I really like those, number one, because I think people have a hard time cooking fish, or they're not because they can't do it because they're afraid of it, right? I mean, you cook them all the time, so you're set. But I know that you probably experience this too, where a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't want to make fish because I'll burn it or it'll
dry
taste
it out.
terrible." Exactly. But this one, because I feel that it's really easy. So basically, it starts out with a little bit of rub. And that's just chili powder again. And if you're not a spice person, you can buy a mild chili powder for this too. I didn't specify hot or mild, so you could use whatever is a comfortable heat level for you. And then a little bit of sugar, some cumin, and then you rub that, mix that together with a little bit of olive oil and salt, and then you just rub that on top of the salmon. And this recipe is actually based on a recipe that I made for my husband when we were first married. And it was something he wanted all the time. And I actually got really tired of making it for him that I just sort of stopped making it for him. But it turned into a good taco, sort of made a few changes. And I really liked the way it turned out. So it's really easy. You rub the salmon. And then I think that a lot of times people forget that you can actually, put this in the oven. And it's very forgiving when you kind of broil your fish. And it's actually quite simple and doesn't take a whole lot of time. So then you just cook it. And then that's about it. That's all you do to cook it and get it all ready. And then there's a nice little guacamole topping that goes on top, and that can come together while you're cooking the fish. It really doesn't even take that long. It's just a traditional kind of guacamole-ish recipe where it's avocado, lime juice, salt, a little jalapeno if you want, some scallion, and of course some lime juice. And then you just serve that all with the sauce, the guacamole sauce, and the shredded cabbage on top. I'm obsessed with cabbage as a topping.
And what kind of tortillas?
So for these, I use the corn. I really like the corn taco shell. But again, I think you could use anything. And if you're someone who's not really even wanting a tortilla, I think this would still be really yummy in like a lettuce sort of tortilla too.
A lettuce cup. I like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Kind of refreshing.
Yum. So tacos are healthy. I mean, you're a dietitian, you're a chef, and my sense from the book is that you really just want people to have fun. But isn't kind of the icing on the cake that tacos can be really healthy?
I think so. Well, I think it's funny you mentioned that, Liz, because I wrote the book going into it. You know, I was a little wary that people would think it was more of a, well, originally it was supposed to be called the Healthy Taco Cookbook. And I didn't want that because even though I'm a dietitian and I talk all about nutrition, I want people to know that when you eat the way that I've written, that it's mostly nourishing foods, right? And that they're good for you. And I wanted people to just sort of accept that and not be obsessed with this whole like, oh, it's healthy for me kind of concept. You know, just embrace that these fresh vegetables and these whole grains and beans and stuff, all those things are very nutritious. They just happen to be delicious too. So kind of this beautiful thing where we start to recognize, you know, we don't have to always call it healthy. It's just good for you food because it's good for you and It tastes good. So,
and the thing too is like the thing I love about your book is that when we think about tacos, we think Mexican, but I feel like you've brought in sort of world cuisines into this book and different flavors. So it's not just sort of traditional Mexican, but you've got Asian inspired tacos. Tell us about some of the different kind of combinations you're using and the different cuisines that you're incorporating into your recipes.
Yeah, right. Well, I thought that was really important too, so that I wanted to make it so that people who weren't familiar with foods or comfortable trying them in a different way, I feel like tacos are really approachable, right? They're really fun. People love tacos. So I felt like if I can sort of teach people about maybe these other food flavors and combinations and cultural things, that maybe they'd be more inclined to try them in other situations. And so, yeah, I've got like a banh mi taco, which I think is really fun. I have a Korean barbecue steak taco. And then I also have a jerk chicken with mango avocado salsa, which I really love. And even some of the vegetarian recipes are, you know, I have a roasted chickpea tabbouleh recipe that I really like. And, you know, there's a whole bunch of different ones. And I think the idea was also to try to appeal to a bunch of different people's palates. You know, let's see if we can try this one. And if it works, you know, great, because then that's just another person to appreciate and like tacos in a new way.
So I've got a family of meat eaters, but I've got my husband, Tim, who doesn't eat meat and he only does fish. And so what I like to do is kind of shake things up, and we do a lot of vegetarian in our house. We do lots of seafood. If I'm doing chicken, no way will Tim eat it. If I'm doing red meat, he'll have a bite. So, you know, like everybody else out there, I'm kind of juggling. But I made your Mexican grilled corn tacos because fresh corn is in season right now, and it is so, so good. I'm loving it. And so for this recipe, which is on page 148 of your book, it was just so easy because I cooked up 4 ears of sweet corn, and then I just removed the corn kernels from the cob. And then you had this really great sauce, which was avocado, olive oil, lime juice, chili pepper, salt and pepper. You called for feta cheese, a little bit of red onion and cilantro, and I happen to love cilantro. And that was the sauce. And then for the tacos, you called for pepitas, which is pumpkin seeds, thinly sliced radishes, a chopped tomato, and then you called for the hard taco shells. And I actually blogged this. This will be on the blog, everybody, and in the show notes, I'll give you a link to it. Oh, and we're also doing a giveaway, just as another friendly reminder. Head on over to the show notes to enter. But I love this recipe because to me, it just tasted like summer. I'm loving radishes right now. In fact, I just roasted a bunch for a side dish for dinner last night, and I'm loving the corn. And anything with avocado, of course, makes me really happy. This recipe I thought was really clever, and I loved that corn avocado filling. And to me, it was very hearty and really satisfying. And I think this would be good on any kind of tortilla.
I agree. And in fact, I had my testers try it on a couple different tortillas, and they liked it on the soft, but I went with the crunchy because that's what I liked. but I agree. I think it could be delicious on any platform.
So I've recently discovered these crunchy taco shells that are actually flat on the bottom, because when you do the crunchy, the crunchy just sort of fall over on their side.
Right. Yes.
And of course, when you're trying to do food photography, it's like near impossible. So I forget the brand, and I'll look it up and I'll share a link in the show notes, but it's flat on the bottom.
That's so smart.
Of course, when you bite into a crunchy taco shell, everything falls apart, but whatever. What are you going to do?
That's what your fork's for.
That's right. And if you have little kids or kids with braces, it can be a problem. So
right.
Shake it up, experiment, try something new.
Absolutely.
So when you go through the book, you've got fish tacos, you've got pork, you've got chicken, but you also have a dessert chapter. So as I said, avocados, my number one favorite food in the world, but my number two favorite food, and this is really true, and I'm a dietitian, I'm going to admit this proudly, s'mores are my number two favorite food. And it just s'mores reminds me of being a kid and going to summer camp and making s'mores. And I love them. It's just like a memory food. So you've got to tell us about your s'mores tacos. We're taking off our dietitian hats right now.
Well, Liz, I love that you love dessert, because so do I. And I'm happy to exclaim that because it's part of life, A little bit of sweet treat is what makes the world go round. But these are actually more a labor of love, because I really wanted to make a s'mores taco for the dessert. And so I sat around thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? How am I going to make this? I can't bend a graham cracker into a taco shell. So I basically tested about 1 million different ways to make a pancake, like you had mentioned earlier on in the show. So you take crumbled graham cracker and you mix that with a little bit of whole wheat flour and you make pancakes. And after you make the pancake, you kind of shape them into, you can kind of bend them a little bit. I used all kinds of things to try to accomplish that. You can use a muffin pan flipped over, and you can set the little pancakes between the muffin tin cups, if that makes any sense, and that will help kind of make them bend. Also, I think I wanted to stress too in this book that it's not about perfection. It doesn't have to look really awesome to taste good. So if you don't care about your thing looking like a taco, then don't mess with bending it if you don't want to, because it's not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to be fun. So, approach it that way, I guess I would recommend. So I just made the pancake, and then that's the hardest part, and it's really not that hard at all. And then you just top it with some mini chocolate chips, a few mini marshmallows, and then I just stuck them under the broiler until the marshmallow kind of gets nice and, brown and the chocolate starts to melt. And then it's done. And then you can do anything else to it if you want. I mean, my daughter wanted to add sprinkles, so I let her do that. But then you could, put some fresh fruit on top if you wanted to. But really, that's just kind of a nice base to get started with if you feel like exploring a little bit more. So they're really easy, and even your kids can help do it. In fact, my daughter, of course, loved to help make these.
So you're saying you can take the pancakes, once they're done, you could kind of fold them and put them in between the upside down muffin cups to kind of hold them. So when you fill them, you pop them into the oven, because obviously that muffin tin is oven safe. And then you just broil them that way. When you pull that muffin tin out of the oven, you just carefully remove the tacos, which everything's like gooey inside, right?
Right. You got it.
Oh, I like this. I like it a lot. And I do like the idea of adding maybe some raspberries or thinly sliced strawberries on top. Like, why not?
Why not? I'm with you.
I love
Let's do it now.
I love that idea. So you've got your favorite right now. What about your daughter? She's 5.5 years old. Obviously, she loves the s'mores. But does she have a recipe in the book? I know you have a kids chapter, so recipes that are a little more streamlined and simple, right? Why'd you do that kids chapter?
I did it because I have a lot of nieces and nephews and friends who have children. Well, not my nieces don't have children, but my friends have children who are really interested in cooking, and they make their own recipes all the time. And I am fascinated and truly excited about how interested they are about being in the kitchen. And they're not afraid. They want to explore. They want to see what happens, and they love it. So I felt like, if these kids have something to share, let me put it in my book. So I asked them to share, some of their favorite recipes or what they thought their kids would like. And it was kind of a magical experience. If I could go back, I'd probably dedicate half a book to just what kids can come up with, because I think it's fascinating.
Give me a few examples.
Well, so my daughter is obsessed with hummus. She's loved it since she was a baby, and I'm excited that she did. And so the base of her taco is sort of what she would just normally eat as a snack. It sort of started out as she would just eat hummus with pita chips and hummus with carrot sticks. And, she really likes the crunchy stuff too. So I thought, well, let's try this on a tortilla. So, I used a soft tortilla, then a little bit of hummus, and then the shredded carrots, trying to make it fun, because she also likes to build, kids like to build stuff. So I let her spread the hummus on. I let her put the shaved veggies on there. And then, then she has fun kind of rolling it up and eating it. So I thought that was really fun too. And then my niece, she's 11, I think. She was the one who created the chicken recipe. And I was just so impressed. She loves to cook, and she came up with all the toppings, all of it herself. And I couldn't believe that a kid of that age could write such a detailed recipe. And it was impressive. And I thought, well, we definitely have to add this to the mix here. So
these are recipes created by kids and easy enough for kids to make.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a mixture of both.
Mm-hmm. Love that. So this leads me to my next question/comment, and that is that August is Kids Eat Right Month. And you, as a dietitian and a food blogger, have spearheaded this whole campaign called Kids in the Kitchen. I'm participating, and everybody, if you didn't listen to my Kids in the Kitchen podcast 2 weeks ago, be sure to tune into that show. But tell everybody about Kids in the Kitchen and this whole campaign and how people can follow along and why we want to get kids into the kitchen.
I love that you want to talk about this, Liz. Thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for participating. It means a lot to have you on board. It all started a couple years ago, and, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics does a great job. They have a Kids Eat Right section of the website, and I love how they have kind of taken ownership of helping kind of give kids a platform too for cooking. And I wanted to take it one step further, because I know that there's so many of us who are so passionate about getting kids in the kitchen and cooking, because we know that when kids are doing that it's more than just the experience of cooking. There's a learning component, and it can be a great life lessons for, math and science. It can also be great bonding time with your children. And it can also be a great way for them to learn about where food comes from, that food isn't free, that food is nourishment, and that we should appreciate it. And I think that's kind of, after having my daughter, and I really appreciate more now than ever, making sure she knows all about those things, because I think that is an important life skill that a lot of kids don't, are missing out on. And I think we all need to kind of embrace the fact that we can do something about it. And I love that all of my dietitian colleagues are jumping on board and want to help spread the message that kids can cook and should be cooking with you.
So Kids in the Kitchen is a hashtag people can just follow along on Instagram and Twitter if they want to see what everybody's posting.
That's right. Yes. Thank you. Yes. Follow the hashtag on all the social media platforms. And I also wanted to make sure people can post their own things too. So we have a wealth of knowledge, but I know that every mom and caregiver out there has also a lot of knowledge that we don't have. So if you all have something amazing to share, which I know you do, then go ahead and add that hashtag too, and we can follow along and comment on your stuff as well.
Good stuff. I love that. So I want to remind everybody again, Taco, 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 we're giving away a copy, U.S. only, over at lizshealthytable.com. Check out the podcast page in the show notes. But Sara, I always like to ask my guests if they have a favorite cookbook, obviously, other than the cookbook they wrote. So is there a book out there that you tend to kind of refer to as a chef and a dietitian?
Yes, I happen to love a book. It's called The Flavor Bible, and I find it a very helpful resource because sometimes when I'm in the kitchen or if I'm feeling like I'm writing a recipe, I'm searching for an ingredient that I can't quite place, I'll go to that book. It's a great resource for trying to kind of find complementary ingredients. So, for instance, if you're looking for, maybe you have chicken, then you can look up chicken in the book, and underneath it'll list all the foods that go well with chicken. You know, it might say like lemon, and I would say, oh, right, I could use lemon. So I think if you're someone who really likes to cook and you don't really like to cook by recipes, but you kind of might occasionally need some help knowing what goes with what, it is a great book for that. It helps you kind of be more creative in the kitchen.
I love it. I love it. Well, check it out. We'll give a link to it. So speaking of what goes with what, you had talked before about avocado and guacamole, sort of that's like a classic topping for tacos, one of my favorites. But give us another topping, another sauce, something else people can be thinking about, something that's in your book that the next time they make tacos, they're like, oh, I can whip up that yogurt sauce or that whatever sauce. So give us another little favorite of yours.
I think I think yogurt makes a great base for a lot of different sauces in the book. So I think having plain yogurt on hand for making a lot of really great stuff. So a sauce that I love usually starts with a yogurt base, and I like to use plain yogurt, and I use usually a whole milk yogurt or a 2% yogurt just because I like the mouthfeel and the creaminess that goes with it. And then an easy thing to do is to buy a can of Chipotle chilies, pull out one, and then you can freeze the rest of the can. Just empty it into a freezer safe bag and then put it in your freezer, label it, and then you can pull it out, break off pieces whenever you need it, which I think is awesome. So then you just add the Chipotle to the yogurt, a little bit of lime juice. I always have limes in my refrigerator. You should too. They're so much fun to use. I use the zest and the juice. And then you can add things like cumin if you want, a little spice. And then I always add a little bit of garlic, of course. Why not? Adds a little bit more flavor. And then I use my stick blender and a little bit of extra water because the Greek yogurt will be pretty thick, maybe even some cilantro. And then I just whiz that up real fast. And that makes a nice creamy sauce that's good for a while.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really good. You know, I tend to use my mini food processor, and I talked about it in my last show because it doesn't take up a lot of space. And so I think for your book, that's a great little gadget if people don't have it. You like your stick blender or a mini food processor just to whip up these quick sauces.
I totally agree. And I never used my stick blender so much than I have in the past year or so that it took me to write this book. And I agree. The mini food processor, like you said, is small and it's also not very expensive. So it's a reasonable purchase that you'll use a lot.
Hey, cilantro haters, 50% of the population. What can they use instead of cilantro?
That's so sad. It's okay.
I know. It's genetic. It's genetic. People can't help it.
I know. It's okay. My advice is I would probably just honestly leave it out. And if you wanted to add something that's a little bit green, I would even consider adding either a little bit of Italian parsley, flat leaf parsley, or a little bit of oregano, fresh oregano, not dried. And not a lot, just a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit of extra flavor from a little herb scent to it.
I think people don't think of fresh oregano as often as they should. But it's intense. You don't need a lot of it. It is.
You don't, right. And you could dry it too. So if you buy, I know you can't buy a little bit of anything anymore. So you can actually dry it too. So don't be afraid of buying the package because you can just dry the rest of it out and then use it, in a dried application later on.
Okay. Sounds good. Sara, where can people find you on the web and on social media?
You can find me. I have a website. I creatively named my website Sara Haas, RDN.com. So you can just search my name and you'll find me. And then on Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest, I'm Cookin' RD. So there's no G in there. It's just COOKINRD.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really weird and really bizarre that your last name is Haas, as in the Haas avocado.
No relation. It's so sad.
You could be a spokesperson for the Haas Avocado Board.
Right? We should tell them that.
I think so. I'll be your agent.
Okay, thanks.
Sara, anything else you want to say about Taco, 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 over 100 recipes for everybody? I love this book. Anything else you want to share with us?
I want people to have fun. I want them to be in the kitchen, having fun, no stress, just enjoying themselves and cooking. That's all this book's about.
I love it. I love that advice, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. I had a fun time.
So if you enjoyed the show, feel free to post a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Head on over to lizshealthytable.com and enter the giveaway. And until next time, thanks for listening to Liz's Healthy Table.